And we live. Hey, young world.
All right, well, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this special Black Power Media Edition conversation with members of American Descendants of Slavery. My name is Jared Ball. We're going to take a minute. We have a format. We're going to go around. Everybody's going to introduce themselves, and then we're going to what is it? I forgot. First of all, forgive me, everybody. Let me slow down a second. I'm rushing from one other thing to the next. Good evening. Welcome. What's up, everybody? We are very excited to have this conversation. Looking forward to it. And as I was starting to say, we do have a format. We are going to make room so that everybody has a chance to introduce themselves. Then we have another round where in alternating 5-minute segments, we're going to allow each so-called side to offer up their views. Then we have a Q&A segment for us and you all to engage, that is those in the chat and comments, to engage in some backs and forth, 30-second presentation of a comment or question. And I believe it's a 2-minute, I'll check in a second, response. And then we're going to have just a more or less loosely formatted closing conversation that, though I'm clearly biased and on a side here, I will unbias myself more or less and moderate just so that we can keep it moving and get towards a conclusion within roughly 90 minutes or so. Everybody gathered? Anything I missed out, got wrong that need to be clarified on? Here, Doctor, go ahead.
Only thing is, what we're doing is, since we're going to be cautious and respect everybody's time, we're going to have this go off when your time is up. We just ask you to wrap it up when you hear that. You know what I'm saying? Wrap it up. That's all.
All right, good enough. We do expect at least one other person to be here. I thought you all had a sister and that we were the ones lacking on a sister on this one. So I will at least apologize for my contribution to this all male gathering. But anyway. Since I'm already talking, my name is Jared Ball. I'm one of the co-founders of Black Power Media. I host I Mix What I Like. I'm a professor at Morgan State University and a longtime supporter of all kinds of underground and radical formations and media efforts. And just clearly for this conversation, identify as a radical Black nationalist and Pan-Africanist. And I don't know if you all see how I'm seeing it, but maybe Chad, you want to go? We can go around in that order. And Chad, you can go up next.
Yeah, that works for me, Dr. Ball. Number one, thank you for having us here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. There's one thing that I do want to clarify up front. I'm here just speaking on my own behalf. I'm not here representing any group or organization, and I'm not associated with the hashtag movement or that organization. So I just wanted to make that clear up front because I did see some of the marketing that went out. But just to go about me, one of the greatest accomplishments of my life is I found a woman who's been able to put up with me for 13 years. So I've been married for 13 years. She gave me 2 beautiful kids. I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi, but I now reside in Los Angeles for, a little over 10 years now. I'm a graduate of Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi, studied political science there. So shout out to the Eagles and the Bulldogs in Jacktown. I started my professional career in Atlanta, Georgia as a municipal bond analyst working for Maynard Hobart Jackson, former 3-term mayor of Atlanta, one of the first Black mayor of a major southern city. Is that that's my wrap it up? Oh, okay. But I'll just say I'm looking forward to a productive conversation today. So I'm just happy to be here.
Right on. Thank you very much. Is that Brother Logic? Are you next? Do I see that right?
Yes. Peace. Yes. I'm Brother Logic. I'm one of the co-founders of Be the Power, which is a political education organization. Also one of the co-founders of the Sons and Daughters of Freedmen, which is also a nonprofit organization for social justice. And I'm here to join the discussion. These are my reparationist correspondents that have called me to this gathering, and I'm just happy to be a part of this discussion. And we're going to hopefully have a good edifying bill tonight. And I don't know. I don't want to get the so I'm just gonna leave it. And we can just get straight to it.
All right, brother. Should we go to Derek? Derek, you just getting here. We're doing a 1 minute introduction. Just everybody introduce who they are, their name, and roughly their affiliation, and in 60 seconds or less, so you don't get the.
All right, no problem. Peace to everybody. Peace to all the panelists. My name is Derek Williams. I am from Alexandria, Virginia, originally, although I've grown up throughout the entire Maryland, greater Washington, D.C. area. Better known, at least among us, as the DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia. I'm a recording engineer by trade, although currently I'm not doing that. I got involved with the advocacy process through the ADOS movement. I heard about the ADOS movement probably about 3 years ago, and that's when I started to get involved with politics myself. So I'm here in regards to the discussion again, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity, fellas. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, brother Kamal.
Hey, so my name is Kamal Franklin, longtime organizer, activist, originally from Brooklyn, New York. For these purposes, I think it's important to establish sort of ideological background similar to what Jared said. So I'm a revolutionary nationalist in my thinking, Pan-Africanist and internationalist. I think we are battling a system of white supremacy that is connected worldwide. And I think that is, what we're fighting in terms of what Black liberation means for us as a people. And I think it's important for us to make connections not only here, but internationally and around the world. So, yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
All right. Brother Ibrahim, welcome.
Hey, peace, everybody. My name is Ibrahim Tanner. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm the former president of Indianapolis ADOS and one of the co-chairs of Muslims for Reparations. I'm here, I reached out to Dr. Ball just to have this conversation. I felt like, we were being talked about, but we're not being talked to. And I know like there was some issues with that. And I'm just glad to be here to have this conversation. I definitely have a national perspective. And I think it's tied to some of you guys' perspective, right? So I just wanted to have this conversation to kind of iron out some of the philosophies and concepts of what we started with the hashtag movement and what we are doing now.
Right on. Brother Kalaji, that's on you then.
What's happening? My name is Kalani Changa, the founder of the FTP movement. I'm a revolutionary nationalist and Pan-Africanist as well. I co-host Renegade Culture, and I'm also a co-founder of Black Power Media. Let's go.
All right. So, well, Ear Doctor, you want to say what's up? I mean, I know you just keeping time in the music and all that, but you here,
Word. Ear Doctor here. I'm all about my people. I'm one of the producers on a Renegade Culture podcast, also one of the co-founders of BPM, Black Power Media, and I'm ready. I'm keeping the time, so let's get it.
And we already addressed this, but I'll just say real quick to Mac out there in the comments, we did reach out to some sisters. We thought some sisters were involved. At least I was under the impression there were going to be two, and we just but I'll put that on me, and there it is. So yeah, thank you for putting that up, and there it is. So okay, so I'm happy to accept that criticism and critique, and we'll do the best we can despite the fact. All right, round two is an alternating fashion, beginning with one of the representatives of ADOS. We start with one person offering their 5-minute position, and then, quote, one of us from the other side, so to speak, will go for 5 minutes. So do you all have a preference who goes first?
Yeah, I'm going to start it off.
Okay.
So basically, we were all former members of ADOS. And we kind of like went through some of the growing pains that Black Lives Matter went through. We had we kind of like built this philosophy out from a nationalist perspective. And like me, myself, and others, we started chapters because we seen the importance of organizing and mobilizing politically around some of the political education we was getting online, right? And I think it's important to say that we had this vision even when the quote unquote leaders, or the founders, as you may say, didn't have this vision, right? So we just started out and we built chapters. So we was all formally members, and then there was kind of like a split when people words and actions wasn't leading up. But we still hold like most of the core ADOS philosophies, right? And I think there's been a lot of mischaracteristics of like what we believe, and I think people get some of our principles misconstrued with what like Yvette Carnell or Antonio Moore believes, right? And it's not really reflective of what we built as a collective. One thing I would say is that ADOS is not xenophobic. ADOS is not anti-immigrant, right? We're not even anti like Black solidarity. We just believe that we are a tribe, right? And as tribesmen, we should come together and fight for our particular justice claim in America, right? The thing about like I know most Pan-Africanists see themselves as like anti-imperialistic, anti-capitalistic, even revolutionaries to a sense, right? And they kind of see ADOS as other than. I believe we are like more the same than we are different, right? I don't believe you can truly be anti-capitalist, right? And you get up on Friday and you check your bank account and you're a tax-paying citizen and you've been in this country the whole time, right? I don't think you can be anti-imperialistic if you just been here the whole time, right? I mean, some members even like I've known people who have served in the military, but then they have a Pan-Africanist point of view, right? And I'm just not understanding. It seems to be like there's a dividing line between what we believe in as nationalist activists and what Pan-Africanists believe in, just based off philosophy, right? Not really based off lifestyles or how you really live your life. Another thing, I think like the reason our message resonates with young people, right, is because we speak directly to the condition of, young African American people, like in the condition that they're in. We're not telling you that like you should align with somebody else or be something else or even like have some type of relationship with a land that you don't know, right? Like we're nationalists at heart, right? We was born in America, most of us gonna die in America. We live our whole life in America, and we just want to be able to excel in America, right? And basically be paid what our ancestors was owed, right? And what we are owed. And that means reparations for slavery and Jim Crow, right? But then there's a greater Black agenda for all Black people in America. And I don't think that part gets tied in, right? It's not just all about those who you would consider descendants of slaves or freemen, right? There's also a second part to that, which is a Black agenda, because everybody that comes here deserves equity. But we believe reparations is specifically for the harms of slavery and Jim Crow, right? And that's what a lot of our political advocacy is tied around. And to me, this is like nothing new, right? Like throughout American history, you hear this even amongst Pan-Africanist scholars, right? That there's a difference between the creation of African Americans over here, right? Like we are an amalgamation of slaves and slave masters, right? And to some extent Indians as well. Even our DNA is different, our cultures is different, right? And we believe with that, like we can have a shared interest, but we can't globally all be the same, especially when the diaspora is not in unison, right? Like Africa is extremely tribal. It's a continent, 54 countries and like over 500 tribes, right? And I think they speak somewhere around 2,000 languages, right? And they have a lot of issues going on, like not just between states, but also like civil issues within states, right? And I think our best position is to get ourselves what we are owed here, right? We come from a great people. We built the greatest country in the world. We built a country where everybody else like immigrates to and tries to like get a foothold in this for success. But one thing I know is they don't see them as like just one big global group either, right? If that was true, right? Because we have Black student unions, right? They come over here, they start African student associations, right? We have the Black Caucus, which advocates for all Black people, right? But they started the African Immigrant Caucus. And you see this so on and so forth, right? Even me, like being in the Islamic community, being born Muslim and growing up in the Islamic community, what you'll see is like at first when the numbers is low, we'll all be at one masjid, right? As the numbers get bigger, they start to build masjids based off what nation they from. And then as that nation numbers get bigger, they start to branch off and build masjids based off what tribe they're from, right? And I respect that. I respect their difference in like how they want to do things. I don't think we get respected for being nationalists when we want to do things, right? And there's just a bunch of examples. I'll just give you one. When Lupita Nyong'o played a Nigerian character in this Africana show on HBO, she got a lot of pushback from Nigerians, right? They didn't just say she wasn't Nigerian. They said she wasn't Igbo. And it's disrespectful to have somebody that's not Igbo playing an Igbo character, right? And they talked about how she wanted to be able to speak the Igbo language properly and how she'd have an American accent, right? She's Kenya and this is Nigerian. When we push back from like Cynthia Erivo playing Harriet Tubman, right, which is one of our freedmen ancestor, heroine, everybody calls us xenophobic, right? And that's just one example, and we'll have more throughout this discussion, but it seems like everybody else can do a certain thing, right? But when we do it, it's like the whole diaspora comes down on us, right? Even our own people, and say you wrong. When they do it, we say we should be like them, but that doesn't even work out, because as soon as we do it, we get backlash, right? And I think like we have our own identity, we have our own culture, like we are a different group of people, right? Dr. Amos Brown said America is not just a nation, it's a nation of nations, right? And I think like so far we have failed, or we've gotten away from being our own tribal group, and that's what we did. Like ADOS or DOS or Freedmen's brought the focus back.
All right, yeah, our colleagues lost their power and they were keeping the time, so you got a few extra minutes there, but that's all good. Since more or less we had a home team bias, I guess, with the hosting here. Real quick, Brother Kamal, I guess you should go next, but I just want to remind folks in the chat that we agreed to have a civil grown folks conversation. So I just want to encourage people in the chat to do the same. And if there's confusion about who or why this is going on and who was here and why they're here, you all should probably just pay a little more attention and hold off on some of the hostilities, at least briefly. All right, Brother Kamal, I'm starting your clock, man. 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say quickly, the reason I'm a part of the conversation is because I was tagged on Twitter with several other folks in terms of this is sort of like, I guess, different Twitter debates, which of course happens frequently. And then I just decided to join in a debate. And part of me joining in a debate, which I was hoping would be a civil debate on Twitter, was really more background for me on what are the sort of true beliefs of ADOS, right? Because it's not something that I know in terms of like I'd say the spectrum of beliefs. And so I wanted to try to gain that. And unfortunately, that went a little sideways at times. But hopefully right here, we can clean some of that up. So I would start by saying, I think there is some basis of some agreement from what I know about ADS and my own politics as a revolutionary nationalist and Pan-Africanist. So I definitely believe that Black people, particularly born in the South, brought up through slavery, constitute a people. I used to belong to an organization in which we called ourselves New Africans, right? As in we came through the European slavery, we survived slavery, we became a people, and therefore we have demands and we're demanding self-determination and so forth. So there are certain ideas that I think I do agree with. I think that there's reparations that are owed to Black people. But I also think in terms of what America is and what white supremacy is, there's reparations owed to Haitian people from the United States and other European powers, right? There's reparations owed to indigenous people, right, from this power and from other powers. So I don't necessarily think we have an exclusive claim, but I definitely think we have a claim and an important claim to make to push forward. And part of me also believes that there's no reason why we couldn't make those claims together, right? But I've never been a huge reparations person because I don't believe that whites, and this is even for like, you know, in Cobra and folks who I probably have more aligned politics with, I've never believed that a white supremacist government, which I believe we live under, is ever going to give us resources enough to make us whole when they've spent all this time repressing and oppressing Black people and other people around the world. And so when the brother talked about living under a capitalist system and therefore being a capitalist, I would reject that argument. If I lived under a dictatorship, doesn't mean I support the dictator. Doesn't mean I support the finances and the operations of the dictator. I don't support the US government. I don't support how it's accumulated its wealth. I don't support the wars that the US government has engaged in. I don't support the actions of the US government in controlling wealth. And so therefore, even though I live here and have to survive here, it doesn't mean that I am one and the same with the government and with the country, which I think has oppressed and you know, Jim Crow to slavery to second-class citizenship to Black codes and so forth. Those things are no accident. Those are the things that an oppressor does. And so there's no reason for me to think that, I'm not saying that you guys are completely saying this, but from other voices I've heard, that I should align myself with the very folks who I feel who have oppressed me in order to get the resources that I think I deserve and or owed, and to do that and turn a blind eye, let's say, to the actions of the United States of America, both at home and abroad, just because I may be trying to get my own individual reparations, right? So I don't think that that's not only a principled strategy for me, I don't think it's an ideology that takes into effect what the US government is. If the US government was interested in creating equity and equality for all, it has the tools to have done that centuries ago. The role of the US government in our lives is to use our excess labor, right? And when it doesn't need our excess labor, it's been to imprison us, to keep us poor and disempowered, and to use us as cheap labor, right? And that's still the role that Black people serve for the most part in this country, and that Black people and other working class people serve around the world to a European dominated capitalist system that exploits labor. So I wouldn't be comfortable only talking about, and again, this may not be the case for some of you on the call, but you know, having these right-wing allies who say things like we don't need to respect other people's opinions because they're not quote unquote foundational Blacks, right? So I think as we walk down this road, the moment the oppressor sides with us, we have to rethink our strategy, because then we are not serving our people, we're serving some other folks.
All right, well, we lost our colleagues again, but that 5 minutes is up. So I'll continue to keep the time. And if you don't hear my phone when it goes off, I'll just start waving it at the screen. So
brother, does that mean I get to go twice?
Nah.
It was worth a shot. It was worth a shot.
So who is going to speak next?
I believe I was next in the order for the brother.
Sounds good.
I came into the discussion because I am a staunch reparationist for my people. You know what I mean? I believe in justice. And one thing I want to get straight, right? When we talk about Pan-Africanism, right, I have no problems with Pan-Africanism as an ideal. My stepfather was one of the most prominent Pan-Africanists in the city of Chicago. My family has been running the African Festival for over 30 years. So Pan-Africanism as an idea is fine. But when we're talking about American politics, we have to understand what having an African-centered perspective does to your American politics. In order to be effective in American politics, you need to have an American-centered perspective. That's the only way you're going to have your eye on the ball. If you have an African-centered perspective, that is going to cloud your political vision here in America. What am I saying, right? Understand that when we talk about reparations, we're talking about repair for specific harms for a specific people. We're not saying no one else deserves any justice. The brother Kamal, what's your name, brother Franklin? I can't see the first name, but brother Franklin was talking about Haitian people have come here and they have experience oppression and certain different things, and that's fine. And if there's a justice claim, which I'm sure there is, it can be constructed properly. And I believe that, Black immigrants, Caribbean immigrants, or immigrants from around the world who come to America and experience injustice can construct a intelligent justice claim and exercise their grievance with the United States of America. The issue comes in when we're doing something specific. When we're talking about the atrocities that our family members understand that our family members face from chattel slavery, emancipation, and the freedmen who were forced from the South from white terror, white violence, and state oppression, and had to be forced up north, making the strongest and the most powerful among us, the men mostly, had to separate from their parents, their family, leave their young ones down south, depleting our political power in the South and being forced up north. That happened to us. That didn't happen to people in Haiti. That didn't happen to people in Nigeria. That didn't happen to the Fulani or the Mandinka or the any of those African nations. So so if we are asking for specific grievances for specific cases, when we talk about the 85 years of lynching, that was predominantly our people. Most African immigrants weren't even here during those times. We know by the data, and we do data as reparationists. We understand that before the Immigration Act and about 1980, the presence of Black immigrants outside of students was to the right of a decimal point. So we understand that there wasn't, when we talk about the atrocities that we're seeking justice for, it was really a relationship between the freedmen. And when I say freedmen, I'm talking about the emancipated persons who come out of chattel slavery and their descendants, their sons and daughters. You understand? When we talk about 1877, the period from 1877 to 1950, when we're talking about over 4,000 recorded lynchings, we're talking about our family members. We're not talking about a large group of immigrants that had to experience those atrocities. When we're talking about the Great Migration that forced families when they didn't want to move, and they really shouldn't even be called a migration. It's the Great Refuge, because we were really refugees fleeing from white terror, white violence, and domestic terrorism and state oppression. We had to flee north, leaving our families, our political majorities, and all of that stuff behind. So we're having an argument with our government about specific atrocities, state and federal sanctioned atrocities, you understand, for specific harms to a specific people. Now, if you are a fan of justice and you support justice, anybody should get behind that. Now, you can't talk about xenophobia and say we're being xenophobic because we're trying to address a specific harm and say and use the whole, well, you're African brothers and sisters. If my brother is in a car accident and I'm not in that car, I'm not going to get any money from that insurance claim. You understand? Even though we're related, I wasn't a victim of the accident. You understand? Now, if I get into another accident, it could be on the same road. Then I have to construct my insurance claim with my insurance company. You understand? So that is similar to the justice claim that we're talking about with reparations. If immigrants have come over here and they say that they have experienced oppression by the hands of the U.S. government, they need to construct a justice claim for that, but they cannot shoehorn that into our justice claim, which is very specific. And I yield my time.
There was no time to yield. You used your time and used it well. So well done. I'm gonna go ahead and go because Kalanji was coming in and out. I don't know if he heard everything, so I'll give him a chance to catch up on a round or two. And let me just start my clock now. So there's a couple things that I think are I just want to take my time in this initial round, at least to clarify. One, the so-called founders of the ADOS movement are not here, primarily because, from my own perspective, I've engaged with them for years, going back to before they were ADOS, and they have proven to not be serious or interested in civil exchange. I've tried for years. Their response has been to lie, to create videos that tell further lies, to even go after my job, which is kind of, unfortunate, but silly as an attempt even. And every, who needs to mute? Who needs to mute? Because I'm getting too much echo. Anyway, so that was why. So for years I had tried to broker a relationship with them. I had appeared on their platform, or at least on Yvette's platform, supported her work. She had appeared on mine when I was, doing interview work elsewhere. So, we have a long history, and then we have a private relationship, at least, where I was trying to, for a time, broker in a positive way her engagement, because I supported her and Tone's work for a long time. It was only when they took a very anti-Pan-African in a hostile way position, and then turned personal against me and some of my colleagues and comrades, that I felt it was unnecessary and worthless to try to communicate with them any further. And clearly they feel the same way, other than Yvette crashing my Clubhouse book talk a couple weeks ago to, again, even when I graciously invited her up on the so-called stage, she just went right into innuendo, lies, and falsehoods. So there's no need to engage on that basis, especially when people like me and others have been engaged with this work for so long. Our track records are clear. But at our mixwhatilike.org, there's so much more on this in the history of my engagement with them, if folks really want to follow up on that. The reason I, at least speaking for myself, agreed to this conversation was because, one, as Brother Ibrahim said, he reached out directly and said, we seem to talk about ADOS and not to ADOS, which is factually incorrect, but still, he can't, when he brokered the conversation and his crew expanded online, it was done so with enough, at least, civility in their immediate exchange that I thought, okay. And then particularly there was the issue that you all expressed, that you were not in line or lockstep with the founders of ADOS. So as some in the chat have even raised, I think it would be good if some of you would further clarify your relationship to ADOS. If you are not in ADOS, why are you here speaking on their behalf, as someone was asking? But from my point of view, and interest, I would want to hear more about that split, as someone pointed out, similar to the one that exists, as I understand it, between the founders of Black Lives Matter and many of the people in the streets doing the work. That said, I don't think that there has been, part of my initial approach to the founders was initially when I saw their criticism of Pan-Africanism, my initial reaction was to say, before we get into a debate about it, on what terms are you defining Pan-Africanism? There's a lot of versions of Pan-Africanism. So I was initially asking that they isolate and explain. They seem to dismiss all forms and to pick, isolated, as I'm hearing even here tonight, isolated, cherry-picked examples to sort of make a point. So there is Pan-Africanism as a politics and a tactic, which is actually in some ways selfish and been long part of an understanding among Black people struggling here and elsewhere, that it's not about just some blind friendship or some holding hands. It's about a tactical arrangement to garner support for individual struggles on the inside. There is zero evidence. There is zero exception and zero evidence to support the zero exceptions to Black history in the United States, where so-called advances have occurred that did not involve some sort of internationalist perspective. So to now say that whether reparations or any other goal is the claim, to do so without a Pan-African or internationalist perspective is tactically flawed. Never mind some fantasy about relationships. It's just a tactical flaw. That's something that I don't hear being explained or defined well enough by ADOS supporters, and as they look to explain and condemn variations of Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism does not mean that Black people in the United States accept all forms of abuse and just blindly express solidarity for others. There is a reciprocal arrangement. And within the Pan-African community, there's plenty of bias and debate and discussion about where are you not helping us and where are we not helping you, and all that stuff goes on. So it's a tactic and a philosophy, not just some sort of blind fantasy that is often simplified and made into some anti-reparations type of claim. All right, my time is up. I hope, I'll do a better job in another round, but I'm assuming that is it Derek or Chad who's up next for your next round?
I can go next here.
Okay,
so
you're on the clock. Go ahead, my man.
Put me on the clock. So thank you, Dr. Ball. One thing I would like to point out is that in listening to you, you spent a lot of time there talking about people who aren't here, right? And the folks who are here, we're here to speak about reparations. And I would hope that we can remove any bad emotion from this conversation and have a productive conversation that centers on reparations. I'm a pragmatist. That is at the core of who I am. And so I'm guided by practical considerations, and I allow data to inform my decision making. I try not to get bogged down in emotion. I try not to get distracted by amorphous idealism or things that are not rooted in validated fact. And I try not to deal too much in theoreticals. So I'm hoping that what we can do here is move past any past emotion, and we can have a constructive conversation about how we move forward and agree on the mission of reparations. And so to that point, to address Mr. Franklin, I heard several points of agreement that I have with you. Number one, you agreed that the folks who descended out of United States chattel slavery are a unique group. They are a specific and unique group here in that country. And that's the core of what we are saying here as reparationists, is that we do have a specific language or lineage that is owed a specific debt, as you heard Logic say, given specific actions by the United States government over the course of 250 plus years. So we are not here talking against any other group. And one of the things I also heard you say, Mr. Franklin, was, there are other groups that have legitimate claims of reparations, likely against the United States government and of other governments around the world. I agree with you. I think that, those are fights that we would be very supportive of. In fact, we see that already occurring with the CARICOM, right? But CARICOM is showing us that they understand the specificity required in pursuing a justice claim. You don't see CARICOM reaching out and saying, Black Americans, we're going to include you in our claim against our oppressors, for our reparations, right? No, they're being very specific in what they're doing because they understand that specificity in a justice claim is essential. So I just wanted to bring that up. It's not an exclusive argument that we're making, but it is a discrete argument for reparations that we're making. The other thing that I heard said was that you don't believe that a white supremacist government will ever give us the resources to make us whole. And I have to say, I wholly reject that argument. I can't make an argument for not fighting because of what you think the expectation of the result would be. If that was the case, we would likely all still be enslaved in this country, because there were those on those plantations who said, why are you fighting? Why are you attempting to escape? You'll never be free. The institution of slavery will continue on into perpetuity, so you should just get comfortable with it. So I have to say, I wholly reject that argument, and that we must fight for justice wherever there is injustice. And we cannot take the fact that we don't see probability in that as a reason not to fight. The other thing that I heard was that you felt we were turning a blind eye to the actions of the U.S. abroad. So the imperialism of the U.S. abroad and in other countries. And I also have to say that I reject that argument as well. And I do so from the basis of understanding that justice and the way that justice springs is not a big bang event. It doesn't happen spontaneously overnight. Is a series of events that lead up into a goal. So you take the 1950s and the sit-ins movement, that led into the 1960s and the protests that happened in the streets, which then led to the Civil Rights Acts of the 60s and the Voting Rights Act of the 60s. So it wasn't a spontaneous combustion event that happened overnight. It was an order of operation that would not have occurred if that first domino had not fallen, if that first sit-in had not occurred, that then led to the marches, that then led to what we now see as legislation and we can point to as the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, et cetera. So I think we also have to understand that justice, there's an order of operation to this. And what you heard Brother Logic say was that we are at the spearhead, at the tip of that spear here as Black Americans who are at the proverbial belly of the beast. And so we find justice here, just as you saw in 2010 with the Arab Spring event. Justice in one region begets justice in another region. So our argument is that reparations here specifically for this group, and you agree that we are a specific group and that we are owed a specific redress, justice for us will beget justice throughout the diaspora. So as a Pan-Africanist, I think that should be at the core of your ideals if what you're searching for truly is justice throughout the diaspora. And I'm done.
Right on, right on. Well said. All right, brother Derek. No, brother Kalanji, you up. You on the clock.
First of all, my apologies. We're in our community house, and for some reason, all of a sudden, the electricity started glitching, and we was knocked off. But that's neither here nor there. Boom, reparations. I didn't get to hear too much of what you guys were talking about. However, I got bits and pieces. I've always been somewhat confused because when we talk about reparations for Africans in America and we exclude brothers and sisters across the diaspora, it always made me wonder. I'm like, okay, so where did we come from? Okay, if we came from the continent and we were taken from the continent along with all the other resources, the people that should be calling for reparations should be the Africans on the continent. They should be calling to get their people back, getting us back, getting our resources back, so on and so forth. So we're going to make an argument talking about reparations, us just talking about, we're going to get some land here or some trinkets or some type of concessions just won't work. The second thing, if we're talking about reparations, the first order of operations should be the liberation of our political prisoners. We should be calling for the freedom of our political prisoners because of the fact that they are soldiers, they are warriors who sacrificed before many of us were born, before many of us came on the set, before many of us came up with any type of titles, or before many of us even were conceived as a whole. When we talk about reparations, oftentimes we talk about concessions, and we confuse concessions with advancement. And I think that with what I've understood from members of ADOS or the ADOS, again, I don't know where all you guys stand because of the fact that now I'm hearing that most of you aren't members of that particular hashtag movement, as you called it now. So, I'm not quite sure as to where you stand, but the thing is, we're talking about being 13-14% of the U.S. population, right? And we're talking about demanding reparations. We're talking about demanding money. We're talking about demanding land, so on and so forth, that we can't defend. So even if they gave us whatever it is that you asked for, we don't have the ability to defend what it is we're doing. So it would seem to me it would be intelligent if we were to unite with our African brothers and sisters across the diaspora because of the fact that it calls for a united front. Imagine if the continent with 54, 55 countries decided that they would call for reparations. Look at the power and the force behind that, opposed to a few of us. We speak as if, Africa is like Africa is all together and it's just this one big continent and everybody's all for it. And Africans in America are all together and everybody's just uniting around those particular issues. And we know that that's BS. So even when we talk about 13-14% of the population, we all don't agree on basic shit. We don't even agree on our stance and our politics here now. So that means less than 13-14%. So to me, it always appeared that this particular movement was sort of a sidetracking of the slave type program. You know what I mean? It seems like to me that it takes you off the offense and puts you on the defense. We're talking about revolution ultimately. And if we're speaking on revolution, we're not going to achieve or attain any real goals by asking or quote unquote demanding without any type of power or show of force from a people who have proven to be our enemies. We will continue to be laughed at. And the only reparations that I see coming from the states right now at this point in time would be a stimulus check, food stamps, or WIC. That's about it. Medicaid. That's the only reparations you're getting from this government. And anything else is like is really a foolish notion. I'm really, like I said, I'm baffled and confused. And up until this very moment, I really didn't believe that you all believe what you believe. I thought you all was just kidding. You understand what I'm saying? But I see that you seem to be serious. You know, so I'm looking. You know, I see you brothers, and you all appear to be intelligent. You appear to be strong African men and women. But I'm taken aback when it comes to this whole, you know, separatist type thing, especially when we're talking about this whole capitalism situation, because of the fact that I noticed a lot of folks are confused by capitalism. I did get to hear one of the brothers say something about, you know, if you get a check on Friday and so on and so forth. I mean, that sounds nice. And I think I heard Kamal mention something to the fact that, you know, that we don't have to live under, we don't have to live under capitalism to, or we don't have to be capitalist to live under that particular society. Anyway, my time's up, and forgive me for ranting, but I got thrown off with the whole internet situation here.
No forgiveness needed, because with the time check, there's no ranting. Everybody's locked in. You can only rant but so far. Right. So nah, it's all good. Brother Derek, go ahead, my man. It's on you.
All right, thank you. First, I'd like to speak to the brother Kalunji. I know Kalunji very well. As far as the name, we're dead serious. Reparations used to be a concept. It was theoretical. I grew up influenced by Rastafari culture. Reparations is something that's a streamline of Rastafari culture. Just like Rastafari culture has kept a lot of the traditions of Garvey alive. If you want to talk about Pan-Africanism. No, we're dead serious. I used to believe that it was something that should happen for us, but not possible. I've taken a different point of view, but I've learned a lot more about the actual reparations discussion itself. So that's changed my views itself. The other thing too, I wanted to address a couple things really quickly. This might be sort of scattered. I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember all the points from each thing that each person has said. First thing I'd like to say is to Brother Franklin, in regards to your statement about being able to live in capitalism but not being a capitalist, an ideology that's true, but you can't practice that 100%. And I would actually ask you to refer to Dick Gregory, which Dick Gregory said himself, that he himself, whether consciously or subconsciously, also plays a part in those bombs that are dropping. Why? Because we play a part in a capitalistic system. So even though you may not be someone who's actually intentionally or consciously doing something, you may take every precaution that you can to prevent from doing those things. There's no way that you can live in a society that is the power structure itself and completely eliminate yourself from the society unless you live in a self-reliant society, somewhat like the Rastafari people, which I would be willing to bet most of us don't. The other thing I would like to say is, I think this conversation should really start off as, are we a people? Are we an ethnic group? Okay? Because I've heard a lot of talk about African this and Black that, and even the talk has been murky to some degree. I'd like to say African Americans, descendants of chattel slavery, are not African descendants. We are African ancestry. It's a different thing. And I've even looked up the definitions of Pan-Africanism, and by that definition, it means that the descendants of African ancestry, not direct descendants. That's the difference in us. Okay, so there is an American streamline through us that unfortunately we haven't been able to embrace because this country has not treated us well. Now, do we have white supremacist government? We absolutely do. But you got to ask yourself this: how do other people of color come here and they're able to benefit from a white supremacist government, including other Black people? All Black people are not held by the same criteria in every single way under this white supremacist government. We'll get into that later. So in regards to these things, most people I talk to don't even have a process to go about reparations. Most people also think that reparations would come down to land and all of these other things, which I think that those things should be considered. But when you understand the most consequential thing that we have going on right now is the racial wealth gap, which is a lineage wealth gap, by the way, okay? Meaning that this goes back from slavery to Jim Crow, convict leasing, civil rights, redlining, mass incarceration, all the way. And you're talking about lineal family lines. So when you say Johnsons and Williams and Jones and Ball, you're talking about people that are more than 3 or 4 generations after slavery. We're not even talking about once you get before 1865. So we're talking about a specific people with a specific claim to a U.S. government, a country. You cannot go against white supremacy as just a huge power. You have to deal with it as a country. So we're the people in this country. Next thing I'd like to say is about Black politics. Black Americans descendants of slavery are 85 to 90% of the population in this country. So when you talk about Blackness and Black culture, there are other aspects of Black people who have contributed to the culture. There's no question on that. But they came into a culture. They didn't build it. Okay? So what we're saying is that Black Americans need to lead this front politically. The politics has to start domestically first. I heard you say that you're a nationalist. I'm glad to hear that. We need to build a national politics and have a national identity. Most Black people on here don't even know who they are. At the end of the day, if you understand that you're an African, but you don't understand that you're a descendant of U.S. chattel slavery and an American, a citizen, and you got a right to everything here, plus the country owes you specifically because there wouldn't even be a country without you. That's different than coming here and immigrating by will and still having acts of injustice happen to you. That's what we're saying at the end of the day. We're saying no disrespect to any other Black people. We love Black people, but you still came here by will. You came here by will. This is where the slave boats dropped us, as Kwame Ture said. We are specific, as Kwame Ture said himself. The African in America was the only person who had a trip here and knew it was going to be hell. Everybody else came here by will. Guess what that means? That means even Kwame Ture, who was born in Trinidad, came here by will. Did he still deal with injustice? Hell yeah, he did. He's Black in America. He catches hell. But he's not carrying the crude disadvantage that the people that he's born already have. Thank you.
Woo. All right. So now I think with the 30-second question or comment with a 2 to 3 minute response. Honestly, I've lost track of the sheet. Who's supposed to start? Yo,
I believe Ibrahim.
Go ahead, brother.
Ibrahim, yeah. If he has any questions or
if you have a question, like, because we only allotted 20 minutes for this round. So if you don't have a particular question or comment, we don't have to use it. But I just wanted to the next round is open, so a more open conversation or whatever. But
okay, I did have a question because the reason why I watch Black Power Media is because the advocacy you guys do for political prisoners, right? But you I noticed when you speak about reparations, you say that I guess the powers that be, white people, the government, the same people that oppressed us is not going to give us reparations. Like, why would the people with their foot on our neck, like, make us whole and give us, what they've plundered us for so many years? But you guys don't apply that same philosophy when it comes to advocating for political prisoners, right? Because like when you're trying to get somebody relief, you go through that bureaucratic process. And like, so my question to y'all would be, why do you look at like white people won't give us reparations, but they'll free Mumia Abu Jamal? Like what's the difference in us trying to get, economic liberation and him fighting, right? Because it's his right to, and like everybody else who fights to get liberation for him and all political prisoners.
Well, I would just like to take 60 seconds of whatever the 3 minutes are, and I'll give the other 2 to whoever. But it's not that it's not that those of us who make that advocacy have a certain belief in the will of white people. It's that we as you are arguing, we address all means and manner available to get him out. So we do make appeals to the government, and we also make international appeals and Pan-African and internationalist appeals to get international solidarity, which is why Mumia's case, one of the main reasons he hasn't been put to death yet is because of the internationalists, including the Pan-African support for him. So again, my point is tactically, if reparations is the goal, not having an internationalist or joining the internationalist existing reparations movement is tactically a flaw. It's not a question of deserving reparations. It's a question of philosophy and tactical approach. Does anybody else want to respond to that?
Yeah, really quickly. So, I mean, part of this is when we say he will be returned. I think part of this is, for me, reparations is usually something that's given after the war is over. Or even divvied up or talked about. as far as I'm concerned, we're still in the war. Our folks are political prisoners, and they're only released when they're 70, 80 years old because they've been held for 40 years, and they know that they can't do the same things that they did before. So the idea, and again, I take a somewhat of a different tactic, even people who are on my side in this struggle, is that I don't think that the U.S. government does things that are in our best interest. It does what it can get away with. And so it's never going to give us reparations to make us whole, because us being enslaved in some form or fashion, even post chattel slavery, is the goal of the U.S. system. It is the using of Black and other cheap labor and sometimes free labor to make resources to make certain people rich. And if we think that that stuff does not apply and that we're somehow on some playing field where we could just marshal facts around the injustices that were done to us is why we will get reparations, I just don't think that's looking at a clear picture of who your enemy is.
Yeah, to add on real quick, if we're talking about enslavement and we have political prisoners who are currently enslaved, quote unquote, the first order operation is to get rid of, to abolish that particular system and get rid of get them up out of captivity. I think that if we're going to talk about reparations, or we're going to talk about just like when we talk about nationhood, the brother mentioned nation. You know what I mean? If we're talking about nationality, we talk about nation. In any type of war, any type of situation, if we had beef on the street and I kidnapped your brother or your sister or your cousin or whatever, before we could talk about anything else, before we can discuss anything else, the first order of operation is, look, I want my people back. You know what I'm saying? All the other shit we could talk about, we can discuss it later on, but I want my people back first. So that's what
just in the interest of time, I think we do need to keep it moving. Brother Logic,
I think I get the next question.
I thought so too, but
yeah, we're still on the same. I just wanted to make a add-on to that part that just happened. I don't know if you guys didn't understand what Tanner said, but I'm confused with some of the responses, and I'm kind of picking up on some contradictory language. He said that you're advocating for the political prisoners to be released, right? But y'all said at one instance that reparations is begging people who control the power, and that you don't think they will ever, you understand, do what we're asking. So that's whether you got, I don't know. So whether you have people from the continent of Africa involved,
but brother Logic, that's the point.
One second, brother.
But we already,
whether or not you have groups from Africa helping you with this advocacy, you have already said the people who control the ability to release the man won't do it. So if we are in a fool's errand, doesn't that kind of put you in a fool's errand as well? Because it's the same power structure.
No, well, but brother Logic, if we're talking about hearing each other, you have to hear what also was said. My point was that is also why I'm advocating that your approach to isolate yourself from the broader internationalist movement is a mistake. As the political prisoner movement understands, their lone approach, there is no lone approach.
But
so
no one isolating.
So the appeals to the government are not in isolation from any number of all kinds of other activities, including activities that have put people like.
Are you also asking the U.S. government to release prisoners in Africa?
We are. We're not
absolutely.
You're
absolutely.
The United States
right now, we're asking the U.S. government to get out of Haiti. Right?
No.
War campaign. Brother Logic.
That's a part of war.
I'm asking
absolutely.
I'm asking.
The answer is yes, brother Logic. The answer is yes.
Okay, so you're asking the government to release prisoners that they don't have in captivity.
In addition to all forms, any number of other forms of activity. We're not talking about prisoners that they don't have in captivity. That's okay. That's the point is, and I think you're intentionally not hearing this. The point is that if the political prisoner movement is not focused on the isolated effort of appealing singularly to the United States government while cutting itself off and saying others cannot be part of that
why
struggle.
Do you think we're cutting ourselves off?
Because you keep saying you're not part of the internationalist reparations movement and that other reparations. and other people should not be advocating for reparations.
No one on this panel said that. Okay. No one on this panel said that. We all said that we are for justice everywhere. See, the problem is the misunderstanding of what reparations is in general. Y'all think reparations is a tool or instrument to fight white supremacy. That's not what reparations is. Reparations is repair.
That's not my definition, and nobody said that, by the way. I didn't say that.
If you listen to what you're saying, you're trying to use reparations like that. I know you're a doctor. I know you're smart in that. I know you know what reparations is. But you're trying to use reparations as an instrument to fight global white supremacy. Reparations is about repairing specific harm to specific people for specific injustices. That strengthens me and makes me a stronger ally to our brothers and sisters in Africa, and that will put me in a better position to help them.
Logic. Logically, because you broke the stream, I'm going to break the stream. I want to get to a question and try to get back in the stream for the 20 minutes, and then we can go back and have. That's right. And then we can have a free flow, and that's okay. But I'm trying to stick to the stream a little bit because I wanted to ask a question, and it's based on this. It's based on this sort of domestic versus international viewpoint that seems to be some part of the major ideological difference, right? So, Brother Chad, you talked about the civil rights movement. This might be more directed towards you, so I want you to give me a sort of a fuller answer on it, because you talked about the civil rights movement like a sort of a logical one step after the other process that got us to a point of civil rights legislation. But you didn't sort of bring out that, and something I think Jared has been pointing out, that during that same period, part of what led to even some opening, right? I'm not even going to agree that the marches led to the civil rights legislation. Actually, was Kennedy being killed that led to the civil rights legislation being passed. But that's a deeper discussion. Is at the same time there is liberation movements happening on the continent and other places, and part of the well-documented history, right, of the civil rights Black Power struggle during that time period is that the U.S. government thought that it could no longer sort of dictate internationally around human rights when people were complaining about human rights abuses here at home, right? So people internationally were using the abuses of the United States here to talk about the United States not being some citadel of democracy and so forth and so on, which opened up some aspects and rights for folks here, not full rights, but some rights. So do you accept that there is a role for Black people here to join forces with other people internationally to fight similar struggles, whether it's reparations or something else, that there is a role to be played for that coming together?
I think there's a role to be played by the diaspora in supporting our reparations claim here in America if they see that need for justice specifically for our people. Again, in a justice claim, specificity is essential, and you see that across the globe in all justice claims that are brought against formal governments. This is no different. And so I think that our simple point of contention is that we cannot dilute our justice claim by trying to reach out and pull other groups into it when specifically we have a redress that we are pursuing. Now, I always welcome allies. I welcome anyone that's supportive of reparations for Black Americans here in this country. But allyship does not mean that you stand in front of me and you dictate to me the terms of that redress to a people that have been here, as I think I heard Derek say, for over 4 generations, right? I trace my folks back to Newton County, Mississippi in the 17th century. So that is a different set of circumstances, and it's not anti anybody. I get fed up when we start talking about how us being pro ourselves is anti any other group in the diaspora. That is not the case. We are Black Americans who have made specific contributions and been subjected to specific conditions in a specific geography. And I don't understand why that is a point of contention for others in the diaspora to understand and be able to get behind. I've heard comments made. Go ahead.
It's not a point of contention, though. What you're saying, see, there's a couple straws being thrown at here. There's nobody in the diaspora. No, I hear you. I appreciate it. I'm not saying it's intentional or even whatever, but I'm saying that there are the Pan-Africanist movement. The African world is not against Black Americans having reparations. There is no organized Pan-African effort to deny reparations. So I'm not. So again,
No.
I think that is a separate point. And in fact, many of us who are in the Pan-Africanist movement support reparations. And are only advocating tactically that you bring in the internationalist movement to support tactically Black Americans getting reparations. The other point I want to raise from Errol Henderson in the chat that I think is exactly right, that the comparison between the appeals to the government for political prisoners versus reparations is equally a straw argument, in that to a certain extent, at least, political prisoners have been released here and abroad as a part of those appeals and a part of the struggles beyond those appeals, including the internationalist movement and including the work of people like Sekou Odinga, who just got released for his extra legal support of releasing political prisoners. So again, the comparisons are falsely being put together here, and I think we're missing some points here. But anyway, go ahead.
Can I respond,
Please,
Dr. Ball?
absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Again, I don't think anyone here is saying that we will not accept support from the diaspora in our fight for reparations. Let's just make that clear. Nobody is excluding the diaspora from supporting our claim for reparations against this government. But when we talk to tactics, and you say tactically how we should be moving, when I hear that, again, the pragmatist in me says tactically what we should be doing is pay attention to Congressional Bill HR 40. We need to understand that bill is flawed. We need to be making calls to a Jerry Nadler, a Steve Cohen, or Sheila Jackson Lee, and other members of the House Judiciary Committee, telling them that we need the amendment from Dr. William Darity included in HR 40 to give that bill teeth and allow it to move through Congress. So then we can set up this commission to study, and then we can get real proposals for reparations on the table. That, to me, is a tactic. Very specific. I told you what needs to happen, what needs to occur in an order of operations. You see in that, I didn't give you anything theoretical. I didn't give you anything ideological. I gave you what Black Americans need to do here in the United States of America to seek redress for the conditions that have been afflicted upon us, as you've heard many of these other panelists say.
Hey, that's a great point, except the only thing I disagree with that is that is theoretical and political. You're making a theoretical political argument.
But
but it's all good, man.
What you're calling theoretical, I'm saying there's a piece of legislation that is in Congress currently, okay? There's a very concrete piece of legislation. Theoretical is we're not going to fight because they won't give it to us.
Nobody said that. Nobody has said that, and I just gave you an example.
That's exactly what Mr. Franklin said. I'm not.
No, I did. No, I just to jump in and be clarified. Yeah, for me, reparations is not for you. Reparations, but it's a political difference. Reparations for you seems to be the heart of your political struggle, right? And you tell me when I'm wrong. It doesn't seem like, you know, if the U.S. is destabilizing another African nation or country, it sounds like to me you will keep quiet on that if you think it somehow messes with the possibility of getting reparations.
No,
you can jump in. I mean, at one point and tell me when I'm wrong on that. So because that's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like to me.
We would have to jump in because we would have to jump in because essentially all of that is wrong. Because we are focusing on our national agenda of reparations doesn't mean we've put any other agenda to the back burner.
That
doesn't mean that we are silent about international politics.
What are some of the other agendas?
Just don't convolute them all together.
They're not convoluted.
Reparations. We're talking about reparations. When we're talking about international politics, that's what we're talking about. We don't.
Your organizational apparatus has and or will take a stance where it sees the U.S. Whether or not we think it's illegally, but immorally suppressing and oppressing other people, African or not, i.e. in Haiti, in the Congo, AFRICOM. Your organization, you're saying to me, this is for my clarity, because I'd appreciate it. Your organization, you're saying to me, would take a stance and or will take a stance against overt white supremacist action, U.S. military action in other places that is not surrounded around reparations, right?
Hey, Brother Franklin, We're
Yes, sir.
not.
Well, let me answer that real quick.
Yeah, no doubt, Logic. Go ahead.
What
Go ahead,
I'm
man.
saying is we will look at any individual policy, whether it's domestic or international, and if we think it's the best policy to support, we will support it. So that's what we're saying.
Don't give me a political answer.
But hold on.
Give me a real answer. The U.S. right now, let me give you a concrete thing. The U.S. right now is supporting a dictator in Haiti who refuses to leave office. Haiti has been suppressed and oppressed and invaded by the United States. I'm just using it as an example because it's currently in the news, right? For well over 100 and so years, right? U.S. has had sanctions on Haiti, has made sure it stayed poor. It has put its corporations in there, make sure Haiti buys most of its food from the United States, and that it doesn't get to do its own thing in its own country. As somebody in the United States who could do something to sort of stop that doesn't take away from your reparations struggle. You can still say you're for reparations. Is that something that you would be willing to say as an organizational apparatus or a policy or political belief that you'd come out and say the United States is wrong to do that? We need to act for the United States to stop doing that because that is something that it should not be doing. Real simple.
Well, coming out in a position, yes, but prioritizing policy is another conversation. You are intelligent men. We understand government has priorities. So if you're asking me, am I going to prioritize that international position over my own justice at home? Then no.
I'm asking you if you will. You can walk and chew gum at the same time, brother. Right? Are you? Is that
we do understand
do at the same time,
yes?
Right?
I'm talking about priorities. You do understand priorities, right?
So what is your priority?
My priority is my domestic problems, the problems that I face in my local city, my state, and my government. Then I can have, then we talk about what our international policy and position will be. Anyone who understands government understands there are priorities, and you cannot mix your domestic positions with your international positions. They're two separate things.
Right.
So you're asking me international policy and trying to tie it in to my domestic.
I didn't tie it into reparations at all.
When you read the program, when you rewrite
reparations, I asked you simply. Would you not support that at the same time you support reparations?
I don't support imperialism, though. I'm not going to say imperialism is not global. I don't see how that ties in to my domestic problems.
Okay, so one way I gotta jump in here, brother Logic, because we have to start to go to a close. Okay. So what I would just like to say is my humble suggestion is that we each take 2 minutes and close. I'm even just going to go first by just simply saying that I think that to your point, one of the issues that has plagued, I know, some of the circles I've run in terms of the issue of reparations is that the plight for reparations ends up in many ways supporting the imperialism of the country, because the country's wealth accumulation is not simply from the enslavement of African people in this country historically. It is which is itself part of an international accumulation of wealth, and that is something that reparations in some of its aspects seems to want to support, and in the end, this capitalist, imperialist, accumulationist project, than to say that we, descendants of slaves, should then just get a fair share of that accumulated wealth. So for some of us as revolutionaries feel like we don't want any part of that project. We want to revolutionize the entire society, civilization, and world, which would make reparations moot, because all the wealth that we help produce would be distributed in such a way that would be no inequality, and the historical sufferings could then be addressed by communities on their own in ways the U.S. government and white folks can't involve themselves. So that's my I just thank you all for doing this. I think that there's unfortunately a lot of talking past each other. We're not going to come to an alliance tonight, but I certainly, from my end, appreciate that you all came through, and I would like to just encourage us to keep studying and maybe revisit some of the histories that I feel like ADOS has glossed over and pushed out of its own matrix on its own development, and maybe we all might get somewhere else. But anyway, I'm done. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you. And I don't know which order you all want to go in. I see Kalanji in the ordering here. But Brother Ibrahim, maybe we should go in your direction since I went first, and you can have your concluding statement. You got to unmute though. Unmute yourself, or I can help you there.
All right, there you go. I would just conclude by saying, I think first we got to start with the very basics that we weren't stolen from Africa by Europeans. West Africa had a burgeoning slave trade. We were traded to Europeans by other Africans that stole us and defeated us in war. You see the apology from Ghana. You see the New York Times article, my great grandfather was a slave trader, right? And you even see some of the issues that Nigeria is going through right now with the Igbo tribe, with the Diala, the Osu, and the Ohu, right? Like some of that same demonic caste tribalism is still taking place. I think if we start there, we can have a better perspective on like what reparations is. I think you guys draw a line and you put black on one side and European on the other, right? We are for justice, right? No matter where it's at. I particularly had an issue with the bombings in Syria, right? That's, and many of us did, right? SARS was another issue, right? I had an issue with SARS, but I couldn't help but acknowledge the lack of support when we had like mobilized and like went to the streets around George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and a lot of deaths that was happening. The lack of support that was coming from Africa. I believe I seen like one protest come from one nation. So like ADOS, I think we just speak specifically to the people. We are a tribe. We are a nation in a nation. We are a particular group of people. And I don't necessarily see myself in alliance with all black people, right? Just those who do justice. And we know America does selective immigration as well. And a lot of the people that come over here aren't the necessarily those who are willing to get in the trenches and align with us, right? That's just how America rolls. I do consider myself America, and I do consider myself someone who descended from a lineage from Africa, right? But when we came over here, we are a totally different tribe. And I'll just close by saying, reparations is the key to our political fight. Our message is to unite our tribe, right? That's what our whole message is, to unite our tribe in America so we can fight for reparations. And we are accepting of any allies that are willing to help us fight for our justice claim.
Yeah, all right. All right.
Kamal Kalanji. Are we going? We just going around. My bad. Go ahead.
My bad. I thought y'all called my name. My bad.
Oh no, it's all good. Whatever, whoever.
We could go and keep going back.
No, let that brother go. Brother go.
So, I think we clearly just have and I'm glad that the conversation was as respectful as it was. I think we just clearly have political differences, and whether or not those differences sometimes appear obvious or not, there's ways in which they come out. Like I would never. My examination in particular of our struggle here in the United States is that it's gotten mass support from around the world of other oppressed peoples, both on the continent, in Latin America. You saw other, whether or not I agree with everything around the Black Lives Matter slogan, you saw people use it as a way to show support. The Black Power movement of the 60s and 70s was something that other nations and other peoples incorporated in order to struggle for their freedom and had relationships with Black Power organizations here. So I just don't think that our struggle is around whether or not we can get from this government reparations and that somehow makes us whole, when the imperialist project of the United States keeps going, which is really meant to continue to bring profit to a certain amount of individuals and to leave everybody else out. One, I just do not believe, right, in any way, shape, or fashion that this particular government at any point in time in its history will ever give us resources to make us whole. The only time that will happen is when this government is defeated. And so for me, the struggle is not reparations, it's revolution. Because it's only people who are free can demand reparations after an enemy is defeated. I've never read anywhere in history where a winning enemy decides to make its enemy whole, right? That's just not how it works. And so you have far more belief and or thinking that somehow if you play the game the way it's supposed to be game in terms of congressional call your Congress member, call your senator, and even take support from people who overtly, I'm not saying you guys on the phone on here have done it, but other folks in this movement have taken support from right-wing folks, taking not only their resources, but their verbal support and separating them from other people of not only African diaspora, but trying to make those folks feel like they are Americanized or American, when again, the goal of America, as I think we all can list the issues and stances that have happened that lead us to be the #1 in prison, the #1 impoverished, the lowest paid, the lowest wage folks in the country, that those things still exist. And so there's no reason why this particular so-called democracy will do anything different to release us from our slavery. To me, that's not our struggle. It's an idea that people can use, but it's not our real struggle.
All right. Sorry if I hop in there. First, I want to say thank you. I appreciate everybody who came out here. Appreciate the opportunity. At this point, Pan-Africanism, in my opinion, will not work without a national identity of Black Americans from this country's perspective. Okay? To me, that's why I started off the conversation with saying, are we a people? Because until you understand that your politics is based on an identity and you have that identity down pat, you're going around in circles, baby. Okay? Right now, Black America does not have a grasp on its identity. It thinks it's indigenous. It thinks it's descendant of slaves. It thinks it's an African. It does not have a center on its own political identity. You can't even get to the global aspect of that when you're talking about pulling people together here until people understand that. And to be totally honest with you, in my opinion, I totally respect the history of Pan-Africanism. I come from that history, that background. But it's confusion in a sense that Black people here have to understand an identity first here. There will be no, and if America falls, Black people had no money. So what? It's not like we're in a position where we're capable of helping ourselves. We're still at the mercy of other people. So you understand that we only own 2.6% of the American wealth. So we're still in a dilemma. If we leave the United States, we're still at the beckoning mercy of other people until we form those relationships, which Pan-Africanism has not done a great job in doing in regards to Black Americans and Africans. We should be, in my opinion, we could have done a long time ago when I was growing up. I'm almost 40 years old. They could have been sending Black kids to African countries and building these relationships. We haven't done that on a great scale, in my opinion. Is Pan-Africanism international? It surely is. But with all of its internationalism, we still have all of these other things going on. I want to address your comment real quick, Brother Franklin. Of course, we don't take a position on injustice in regards to people because we have a national agenda, a national politics, which is how you get to the global politics, at least get the people inside of there. Does not mean that we don't care what happens to Black people. We the same Black people you see every day. The same ones. We love Black people just like you do. But we understand at the end of the day, that the politics must start here in order for it to even be global. To help Africa, we got to help ourselves first. And we need the help of Black people to support that here so there can be a off-rolling or a wave effect. That's what we're saying.
I guess it's me next then. Yeah, so I'll just close out like this then. So I just want to say that I am a descendant of American freedmen who have a history of making something out of nothing. We are the same people who fought to free our brothers and sisters from chattel slavery. We are the same people who produced the what people thought was impossible. People thought defeating chattel slavery was an impossibility. And if you came out as an abolitionist, that was political suicide. But abolition was done. I'm from the same group of people that got the Voting Rights Act done, that got the Fair Housing Act done, that got the civil rights, not only the civil rights of 1866, but the civil rights of 1964 done. I'm from the people who gave birth to civil rights in America. We've been making something out of nothing our entire history of being in this country. So I'm not going to not continue that tradition. Doesn't matter how hard the road to reparations is, but justice for what my people have suffered is what we supposed to be fighting for. So I'm going to fight that fight because that's what my history leads me to do. That's what my ancestors did. And I'm doing what they did in Reconstruction. I'm doing what they did during the Civil Rights Movement. I'm fighting no matter how impossible the task may be, or how gargantuan this political agenda is. We are here to fight that fight and pass that torch on to the next generation. You understand? Because they were the same people saying, well, we gonna be slaves. We ain't never gonna be free. We're free. You understand? The same people that said they ain't gonna never strike down Jim Crow. You'll never be able to have a senator. You'll never be able to have a representative. You'll never be able to have this, and all the never said that. But I'm the people who made never possible, and that's what I'm here to do. Government is the game, and politics is how it's played, family.
Am I up next?
Yeah.
My man, Logic Supreme, you must be running for mayor in your city, man, because you definitely come with the politics. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, man, I think the biggest difference, first of all, I'd like to say, thank you all. You know what I'm saying? We're all brothers. We start with that. You know what I mean? We all brothers. We have different politics. We have different vantage points. We have different viewpoints, so on and so forth. That's the first thing I want to say. Secondly, it seems that the biggest difference, I think, between the two groups that we have here is it seems that one group is making an effort to totally abolish this system. And it seems the other group is making an effort to keep it alive. I think that the pulse of the United States and imperialism is weak. And I think that by relying and hoping and praying for these bills and for to build nations within this nation, I think that it's a attempt to, as Malcolm said, be integrated into a burning house, right? I think that one of the things our good brother Ibrahim said, which I'm kind of confused about, he said the Africans weren't stolen, they were traded. And it sounds as if I'm wondering, like, traded with who? You understand what I'm saying? Who were we traded for? Were we traded with other white folks? I mean, and who took over the land? I'm confused about that. It sounds like an NBA draft. You know, it sounds like, you trade this one for that one and that one for this one. That's how it sounds when I'm hearing it. I don't, I think at the end of the day, whatever weapon of choice you choose, get down with it, do your thing. But if you're looking to keep this system alive, then it's a thin line between being our brother and uniting with our oppressor. You understand what I'm saying? So we got to be careful with how we move or whatever, because it's I've heard throughout the piece that it is a very strategic move that we have to make. But you all, keep doing what you're doing. Let's all continue to study and let's fight on behalf of our people.
Brother Chad, you get the last word tonight, man. Take us home.
I appreciate all the brothers being here. So from my perspective, I always keep the main thing, y'all. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi. And so if you've never seen poverty in the rural South, I don't think you understand the plight of Black Americans viscerally as I do. We are out here dying. So you heard Derek quickly reference the fact that we only have 2.6% of the wealth. That doesn't even take into account the calcification of that wealth, where we have 80% of our population living on just a small portion of that 2%. In fact, the bottom half of Black America is worth less than $1. I've seen it up close. I've seen the shotgun houses. I've seen the homelessness, even throughout the South and here in Los Angeles. We are dying. So reparations is not a choice of what we want to advocate for. It is the means and the method. It is a debt that is owed to us to continue us as a viable group in this country. So when you hear us here talking about reparations, it's not that we are attempting to, I think, as you said, Brother Kalonji, keep the systems going. No, we are trying to keep our people going. We're trying to get our people collectively uplifted to their right station in this country, to where they should be. This is not about us taking any considerations for American imperialism. These are considerations for Black folks, for Black Americans. And if you understand our true condition, if you understand what we're living for, and you see the numbers and you see the data, again, the pragmatist in me, I'm guided by data. When you look at those numbers and you can honestly say that we don't need wealth infused back into our communities, the debt that is owed to us repaid. And I also have to take contention with, you say, hoping and praying for bills. I guarantee you hoping and praying is the last thing I'm doing. I'm on the streets and I'm on the phone and I'm on the email, and that's evidenced by AB 3121 that's out here in California that was passed into law. So I'm not hoping and praying for anything. I'm about that action, brother. And the other brothers on this call about that action. And the people that are in this movement for real are about that action. So if you want to hope and pray, that's on you. But I can tell you, we're moving.
How about that action, brother?
All right. I can tell you,
ain't nobody hoping and praying over here.
I'm all the way about that action.
We're moving with this movement, and we're producing results. So I would encourage you to study up on AB 3121 and what that is and how historic that piece of legislation is.
I tell you what.
I'm talking about abolishment, brother. That's
there's going to be. We appreciate it, but there's a lot of studying that needs to go on, because I think that many of the arguments here are lacking in historical context, and so we don't have any time, but we got to wrap it up. I know I certainly need to move on, but I appreciate everybody for doing this. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you back here at Black Power Media another time. Thanks everybody. Like Fred Hampton used to say to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Take care.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.
Peace, everybody.